Hello, welcome guys back to the channel. Maverick here with our weekly dose of March Comes In Like a Lion. So, at the end of last episode, it seems that our beloved Hina-chan is getting bullied, right? At least I think that's what they're portraying there, and especially considering that the episode consisted of Rei sort of reminiscing about his own past as well, I think there's a pretty good chance that that's what's happening, and that's going to be the focal point of this episode as well. Now, with the way that the series has been going so far, and, I think it has some sort of coming of age elements to this story as a whole. So I'm really interested to see how they take care of this situation, right? Bullying is something that it sounds terrible, but I think it's something that you eventually grow up from, you mature from. At least I'm not saying that there can't be long-lasting consequences or anything, but like I said, I'm interested to see how they treat this, because in a lot of cases, it really isn't the end of the world. Considering that this story is more focused on Rei, I do feel like perhaps his involvement with this situation maybe will allow him to come to peace with his own childhood as well. So, is that so or not? Let's get into it and find out. Alright, let's begin in 3, 2, 1, play. You know, right? Oh. So pretty much where we left off from last episode. So I wonder, what could it be, right? At this age, it could really be anything. A lot of the times it would probably, the thing that instantly comes to my mind is maybe some sort of relationship problem, uh, you know, between boys and gals. Maybe, somebody thought that she was, encroaching on their guy, their dude, getting too friendly with somebody's boyfriend or something like that. Or it could be even less dramatic, maybe just, doing something for getting some misunderstanding and then eventually get ostracized by a group. Like I said, most of it is just childish. That's all I can say. But it's how, talking about it in the past tense isn't going to help anything. I mean, even though they will eventually mature out of it, that's still far off, right? And during this time, yeah, bullying. It means the world. Oh yeah, she's in. Okay, so she stood up to them. Yeah, I was about to say, you guys certainly have a... Okay, so... yeah, it's like... a mix. Oh, nice, they actually used ostracize. Alright. I swear I did not watch this episode in advance. Yeah. And then you're gonna get bullied too? April. This is literally about a month since school started. Yeah. Threw her shoes away. That's their teacher? Jeez. Oh. You know, even though it's... I mean, it is kind of drastic, but sometimes I do feel that the best way to resolve this is transferring schools. Because it's really not easy to change how people think, right? I know some people will be like, "Hey, she didn't do anything wrong. Why is she the one who needs to change?" But even if justice was dispensed, right? Like even if they were reprimanded or whatnot, it's not going to change the situation in the class. Yep, and now it's her turn. Yeah, how are they gonna resolve this situation though? This is definitely not an easy case. One thing to note also, Hina was actually crying her friend, not because she was getting bullied herself. Well, maybe both, but I think more so for her friend. I like how with the changing of the emotions, we can also see the. I mean, it is dark right now, right? It's nighttime, but still, we are now more in more of a grayscale in terms of the artwork. So back to the riverside, I'm guessing. Yeah. Oh. Okay. So even though back then she was okay, okay. I like this actually. Like I said, sort of coming to terms with his childhood, maybe. I was just saying, yes, you're right. You are not wrong. Hmm. Interesting. Ooh, there's a part 3. Well, I suppose they still got to resolve this somehow, or at least show us the aftermath, right? What? The ladybug? Let me guess, they leave a trail? Isn't that with most ladybugs though? Oh boy. No, that wouldn't. The only way I've seen someone who was previously ostracized eventually get back, beyond just, with the passage of time, people eventually do change schools. You go from middle school to high school to college, etc. The only other way I've seen it happen is when they have some accomplishment. something that impresses your peers, if you will. Okay. Group hug, group hug. I mean, it's definitely nice that she does have a family that cares for her, right? I do wonder if this is kind of the catalyst that also makes Rei appear in their household even more frequently. Teach her shogi? No, I don't think. Well, I don't really know. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. I think that's it. Although there does seem to be a little bit more at the end. I don't know if it's a preview or maybe just a little bit more. If there is, I'll see you guys again. If not, we'll start the discussion session. Alrighty, so that was episode 26, and indeed the subject topic is bullying, right? In this case, it wasn't a case of where Hina did something on her own, she wasn't the root cause of this, her friend was, but she is the unfortunate, collateral damage in this situation, I guess you could say. And indeed, Rei has taken, taking this opportunity to sort of also delve into his own past as well, and as we can see in the middle part there, being saved in a sense, basically I think what's being portrayed here is Hina saying everything that Rei wishes he could have said out loud all these years ago, right? And that's how they have this resonance with him. Now, I'm not gonna focus too much on what actually happened in this episode, nor the crying and all that. I know, I mean, I've been called heartless so many times before, but really, I do want to kind of delve into my own personal experience as well, because this is actually something that I do have experience of, not as someone who was bullied or was the bullier. um is that how you say it? But I mean, come on. We've all grown up in schools before, right? I'm sure that most of us had some sort of relation or had some sort of observation of this in some way or another. And for me, particularly being both in Western schools and Asian schools, I think there I have a pretty good um range of experience to draw from, and especially also because in high school I was most throughout and the entirety of high school was actually the class rep. The class rep character you guys can see a lot in anime. Yes, they exist in other Asian schooling systems as well. Those that follow a sort of similar education system to Japan, and I can totally recall one case where exactly this kind of stuff sort of happened. And first of all, I gotta say, definitely, I still stand by what I said in the episode where this is not going to be a situation where you can change anything. People at this age, children, they're kids will be kids. If you're going to, forgive kids for a lot of other shit that they do during their childhood, when they're sort of immature, they're childish, they don't really know any better, then you have to also understand that bullying comes with that territory as well. It's unfortunate. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that it's just something that happens, right? And it's definitely not something that you can forcefully remove. Like, you can have all these sort of discussion sessions that you want. You can have all these sort of, all the sort of, how should I say it? Promotions, or going around telling you, hey, you shouldn't do that. That's bad. And you can have all those sessions that you want. It's not going to change the fact that that is what they think of a particular person, right? Going to the teacher, speaking up or whatnot, or even just confronting the bulliers directly. That's not going to change anything. They're still going to consider that person, whoever their target is, as even if not necessarily their target, but at least someone that they really dislike and they want nothing to do with, right? So while again, going from personal experience, there's actually this one kid in our class who, if I'm going to be totally honest, had it sort of coming to him. He definitely was someone who couldn't read the mood very well, let's say. So he did some, during class and whatnot, he said some stuff that is definitely more on the questionable side, right? It's not necessarily right or wrong. In fact, a lot of times I would say what he's saying was morally right, but it was uncalled for in that situation, let's just say. So this kid was indeed the target of not necessarily overtly bullying, but at least more sort of verbal and how should I say it, passive bullying, I guess you could say. Sort of not paying attention to any of the words he says, not really acknowledging his existence, some of that sort, right? And honestly, it's even, I was class rep at that time, and I knew better than to go and confront them and say, hey, why are you guys doing this to him, right? Because that's just not going to happen. They're not going to change their minds just because you are trying to act as an ally of justice and lay down the moral judgment on them, right? That's not going to change a thing. Now, what I did do, however, is I put my foot down on where the line should be drawn. So again, this is even though this was like tens of years ago, I still have pretty vivid memory of this. I think during this one day when the kid had already left, gone home or whatnot, I was still in the classroom, and so were the other, I guess, more outspoken people who disliked him, right? And I recall that they were basically, I don't know how it all started, but in the end they were trying to put basically leftover waste, food waste, so we had those bento boxes. You guys can see them in anime as well, except those were more of the disposable kind. They were in disposable containers, and I think one of them finished his or hers, and then decide to leave. There you always have some sort of leftover food, right? And then just stick it into his desk, right? Now, obviously, you might say, "Oh, well, how is that much so bullying?" But you have to understand that is still food, right? And it's oily, it's got lots of juices flowing out and whatnot, and more to the point, if you leave it there and leave it overnight, it's gonna attract ants and it's gonna attract cockroaches. It's gonna have a foul smell. So it's very generally unpleasant, right? So that was the time when I actually put my foot down and said, "Hey guys, come on, you guys are sort of crossing the line. Stop being so childish. If you don't like him, you don't like him. Don't do stuff like this, right? You can just ignore him, and that would be that." And so Thankfully, I still had some sort of influence at that time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be the class rep. And so, as it turned out, that was generally the only instance that I really learned of where actual physical bullying was going on. For the rest of the years that we spent together, they were mostly just, on mostly non-speaking terms, and even if they did have to speak, the conversation was kept to a minimum, right? And even the bullied kid, he eventually got some of his own friends as well. I mean, at the end of the day, people aren't going to just take, I think this also ties into another point that I want to make, that is, I guess they didn't really touch on in this case so well, but honestly, I feel like most of the bullying cases, or indeed all of the bullying cases that I have been through and experienced and seen, they're never anything to do with, hey, this guy is, or this group, they're gangsters, and you shouldn't do anything to oppose them, or else you're gonna get it, you're gonna get roughed up or something like that. I feel like that, at least for all the schools that I'd go to, it's very unthinkable to have something like that happening. Now, what's more often the case, honestly, is the simple relative popularity level. And what I mean by this is that typically the bulliers actually are quite popular with all the other people in class, and so at the end of the day, they don't want to go against them, not because they're afraid of them necessarily, but because they're in most ways, sort of friends with them as well. So you're not going to really, to try and, ruin a friendship over someone who you really couldn't care less about, right? And I think that's what most of the situations boil down to. It's more of a sort of relative popularity. So if this was, for this situation that we see here in Hina's class, I would even reckon that, more realistically speaking, probably the other the other classmates, the other students in the class, maybe are on more or less good terms with this particular group, right? And so that is why they don't particularly want to stand up to them, to this group, and stand up for Hina's friend there. Of course, I'm not saying that it couldn't be a case where they were just very afraid of direct physical retribution or something like that, but I'm saying that, at least from my experience, that's very, very rare. And so again, this kind of ties into my next subject, and that is, how exactly can this situation be changed, right? And like I said, the only cases I've seen where the person being bullied actually successfully countered this is when their own popularity grew to a point where it overshadowed the people who were bullying them, or if somebody who was more popular than the group that was doing the bullying actually stood up and spoke out against this kind of behavior. And even at that point, it's not necessarily a case where you're reprimanding them and you're telling them to hey, cut it out, or you shouldn't do this because it's bad. It's not that kind of it's like I said before, that's not gonna work. Typically, what happens in my experience is someone who does have quite high popularity within the class decides to befriend this particular person who was bullied, and so that is how people eventually say, hey, if this guy who is popular, this dude who's popular, is befriending him, I think it's generally okay, right? That raises the relative popularity level of the person that was being bullied. I think popularity level really can explain most of the stuff that's happening in, in mid school, high school, and heck, even sometimes, I would say, even so far as to in college as well. Once you get out into the workforce and all that, there's still some element of it to a certain degree, but by that time, most people will probably not have have the time nor energy to actually do this kind of bullying. So yeah, and so like from my experience, because I obviously had some popularity level, otherwise I could not be the class rep, right? Even though I was not particularly of any group, I had cordial relationships with most of all the groups, and so they respected my decisions, they respected what I was saying, and they also knew that I wouldn't be trying to go overboard and patronize them, right? And indeed, I didn't. Now, some could fault me for that, but honestly, like I said, logically thinking through it, it's emotions is one thing, right? But thinking through it, logically and really analyzing the entire situation, trying to force a certain value or force a certain moron to someone is never going to work. So the best that we can do, at least to me personally, is to keep it at least at a neutral, at a neutral state of things, right? Like I said, this is mostly just a phase in life. Anyways, sure, at that time it might mean the world to you, but looking back on it, it's really just like what a tiny minuscule part of your life, right? So that's what I think about this whole situation. And indeed, what I mentioned at the very end there, I'm thinking is probably also the way that Hina is eventually going to turn this situation around. Like the popularity thing I was talking about, I would venture a guess and say that if, for instance, someone who was bullied was chosen to be the school representative into one of the contests or competitions, representing the school, and actually managed to get a pretty good grade or a pretty good result from it, their popularity would instantly go up, and then there would be no problem throughout all of this. Like, they wouldn't be bullied anymore. Sure, the group would probably still dislike this particular person for whatever reason, childish or immature reason that they have, but at the end of the day, they wouldn't really be able to do anything to bully them anymore, because they also, typically, these people who are bulliers, who are bullies, they understand this sort of popularity game very well, right? So once that happens, the tables are turned, they know that this is not someone they can pick on anymore. So there we go. Kind of on a tangent, I guess, from this. Well, not really. I mean, it does relate with what this episode is trying to portray. And I do gotta say though, I do appreciate the way that they up till now has handled the situation. Right? It's not a case where we're not talking about your typical shonen where you need to barge in and then get into a shouting match with the bullies and trying to beat them down through your sense of justice and by, I don't know, like, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? I feel like the situation portrayed here is definitely more realistic. It's not something, you can't really do anything about it. You can only think of some alternatives. You can only think of some other ways in order to alleviate the situation and allow them to have a better school life going forward. And so, yeah, I do think that what's going to happen is maybe, I don't know, my gut feeling right now is actually that it's either something to do with sweets or it's going to have to do something with shogi, right? And Hina is eventually going to stand out in some sort of way, raising her popularity and whatnot, and eventually, like I said, once she gained more popularity with her other classmates relative to the bullies, then everything will work out in the end. So there we go. That is my thoughts and review of March Comes In Like a Lion, episode 26. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you guys think. Have you experienced bullying before or whatnot? I'm sure there's maybe quite a lot of people who have, especially people who watch anime. Particularly during. I don't know. Nowadays, is it still something that to ostracize people from? Huh. Anime is sort of becoming mainstream, right? Same as gaming as well. So, I still remember back in the day when I was in mid school, being a gamer, being someone who loved to read or watch anime. That was definitely something that could also sort of alienate you from the more general student population, right? But hey, I don't know, maybe nowadays it's a completely different situation. Anyways, that's it for this episode. See you guys next week. Bye bye.